So, in this literary analysis, IB Diploma Language and Literature HL for A Doll's House by Henrik Ibsen, we will be doing a page by page analysis that is in depth of the themes, the messaging, and how quotations connect to the overall picture in an IB style analysis. This is for Act 1. Now, the A Doll's House is made by Henrik Ibsen. He was born in 1828, passed away in 1906. He was born in Skien, Norway. He lived during the rise of the 19th century European bourgeois society, wrote during a period of strict gender roles and moral conservatism, and self imposed exile from Norway. He lived mainly in Italy and Germany. Please keep in mind Italy, as there are many inspirations in this drama from Italy, which represents like sort of like an exotic new life through the tarantella dance and many other things. So this exile gave him that critical distance from the Scandinavian society. He clearly rejected romanticism, and he was a creator of modern realism. He focused on individuals versus society, and his play Doll's House has been heavily critiqued for its portrayal of bourgeois marriage, respectability, politics, moral absolutism, and patriarchal institutions, and how it portrays them as innately wrong. Please keep in mind that the context of production is very different from the context of reception. So, there he believed that social roles suffocate the individual, and he caused public outrage and was banned. And his play was banned or altered in some countries as it attacked the sacred institution of marriage through the relationship of Torvald and Nora, and how there's a lot of deception there. So we can see a lot of emancipation as well as Nora's moral reckoning at the end of the play. It's He famously claimed that he was not writing propaganda but exposing human freedom and truth. So he had a major influence on modernist theater, feminist literary criticism, and psychological realism in dramas today. This is important to know these facts, as you can tell by the play that this is a very modern take on and very general take on dramas in general, and it's a very cookie cutter format, but this exact format can give you insight into the context of production and how audiences at that time took this play. So the quotes, this is how it's gonna work from the videos. It's gonna be the quotes on the left, literary analysis on the right, and the key takeaway on the bottom right. Okay, these quotes are from Filicarian Publishing book, and these are not mine. I tried to modify them as I could. Um, when a doll's house opens, nothing appears outwardly unstable, right? It seems very normal. There is no visible conflict, no raised voices, no moral rupture. Instead, Ibsen situates us within that 19th century bourgeois society that would have recognized this as an exemplary domestic space. A comfortable home, a financially secure husband, a seemingly cheerful wife, and an atmosphere of festive normality, as it is Christmas and it is winter. This apparent stability is crucial because Ibsen is not interested in dramatic dysfunction. He is interested in ideological normality. The true subject of the play, at least in Act 1, is not an extraordinary marriage, but an ordinary one. And it is precisely the ordinariness that becomes his most devastating critique of bourgeois society in 19th century households. The bourgeois ideal of marriage in Ibsen's play is that Europe at the time was built upon a rigid division of roles for women and men. The man occupied the public sphere, law, finance, rational authority, moral judgment, seen through Torvald Helmer. The woman inhabited the private sphere, also known as the domestic sphere, the home, emotional labor, moral purity, and aesthetic charm. You can see this from the terms that Torvald and his relationship with his wife, and how he infantilizes her, sees her as an object. So this is like this aesthetic charm that women were supposed to take at the time. These roles were not perceived as oppressive at the time. They were understood as complementary, natural, and even could be seen as benevolent. Ibsen exposes the violence embedded within these supposed harmony by showing how it relies on the systematic infantilization of women, a process so normalized that it no longer registers as domination. Torvald does not need to assert power aggressively because power has already been naturalized into the language, habits, and expectations of a marriage itself. Through calibrating this bourgeois environment, which the play will take part of from now on, there's this formulation that signals an ideological moderation. There's these restraints that are placed upon, right? So Nora makes with what she has. She enters humming a tune, she's laughing to herself, she takes a little bit of macaroons, but there's there might be this sense of warmth, stability, and protection with the fire burning on the stove, it being winter, it being Christmas, a very joyful celebration. But Nora can be seen as controlled. She is she radiates this warmth, spontaneity, and this emotional warmth and energy, right? But this is very destabilized as Nora has a very forbidden interaction with the macaroons. She's not supposed to have them, and she takes it from her pocket, one or two, right? So this could be seen as a minor transgression, but this concealment exposes the extent of the moral surveillance governing her behavior. She might not be physically observed 100% of the time, but as you can see in bourgeois societies, there's a lot of morality put in place upon women, specifically upon women, and this governs her behavior as she must perform at a certain point. The tension between performance and control becomes explicit when Nora is cautious, right? So, cautiously is a very specific adverb Ibsen utilizes, and it reveals that Nora has this internalized authority and she has to self police, right? Even when Torvald isn't there. The main point, you can read it by yourself, so you probably already have. But the main thing is that there's this normalization of fear, right? So Nora has this fear, this little secret. I mean, this can already symbolize, and it already foreshadows what will happen next with secrets and secrecy and deception, with a small act of macaroons. This is very purposeful, and so far, as the audience, you cannot see anything wrong with this. You can just see a woman eating some macaroons and just being a bit careful as the audience. But stage directions, as can be seen in this play, give insight very heavily onto Ibsen's true intentions in this play. Page 6, right? Quotes on the left. So there's this confusion, right? So from his very first words, Torvald frames Nora not as an equal partner, but as a possession. Okay, this has to remain clear, as a possession, as an object of display, something to be admired rather than engaged. The repeated use of diminutives, pet names, animal imagery, it's not just merely patronizing, it establishes a hierarchy of maturity and authority. Nora is positioned as childlike, impulsive, and in need of guidance of the superior being, while Torvald assumes the role of the paternal guardian who guides her. This is not incidental characterization, but a reflection of the ideological framework of the bourgeois household itself. As you can see already, bourgeois household is a microcosm for 19th century households in general, not just bourgeois households. In this case, it is one, but this just gives insight into how households were to be back then. The standardized, normal, even idealized household was supposed to be back then. The husband in these types of households functioned as the economic provider and moral arbiter. He was the one who made the decisions, who authorized decisions, and in this structure, as you can see, love becomes inseparable from control. It gets distorted. Affection does not negate authority, it just legitimizes it. What makes this dynamic particularly insidious is that it's sustained all through this apparent warmth. So, another theme, deception. Torvald's language is not cruel, and that is precisely why it is effective. He does not threaten Nora into submission, he reassures her into it with open arms. The marriage operates on the assumption that protection requires obedience and that dependence is a form of security. Nora's role is not to challenge or even to fully understand the structure governing her life, but to perform contentment within them. Her cheerfulness, her apparent frivolity, her willingness to accept Torvald's moral judgments all function as survival strategies within a system that offers her no real autonomy or voice. This performance is central to Ibsen's critique. Nora is not simply oppressed, she is conditioned. She has internalized expectations placed upon her to such an extent that she initially measures her own worth through Torvald's approval. This is where the metaphor of the doll becomes so powerful. A doll is not enslaved through force, it is arranged, admired, and spoken for. It exists entirely in relation to the desires of others. Nora's identity is constructed through repetition, repeated praise for obedience, through these little nicknames, repeated correction for independence, repeated reassurance that her value lies in her charm rather than her judgment. Over time, this produces what can be understood as a form of false consciousness, in which the individual accepts the moral logic of the system that restricts them. Ibsen's genius lies in his refusal to present the system as overtly monstrous. Torvald is not a tyrant in the traditional sense. He is, in fact, an almost perfect product of bourgeois respectability. He values order, reputation, and moral clarity. He believes in the law not as a flexible human construct, but as an absolute ethical framework. Through this ethical lens, right? This moral absolutism allows him to perceive himself as righteous while remaining blind to the human consequences of his beliefs. Through these quotes, he infantilizes Nora, calling her his little lark, and this little squirrel. Later on, he calls her a dove. We can analyze that at the ending. But this just symbolizes this domestic vitality, right? So the bird itself, the skylark, in the traditional sense, it symbolizes freedom, flight, and transcendence. However, Ibsen interestingly utilizes this as a symbol that is inverted of its true meaning. So you can see it as a cage, right? You can see this little skylark in a cage if you were to analyze it in this way. Both of these names function, and all of these animal names function to remove Nora from the adult human status, to degrade her in a sense. Um, there's this very strict sense of bustling, come home, mine, my, which just infatuates how there's this sense of control over her, how she is objectified um into this animal, right? So this just exposes the deeper message that Ibsen wants to convey, that bourgeois marriage is superficial, and how it truly is just an illusion, right? There's no true love here. There's just expectations and expectations. And as we can see, Torvald becomes a character that is the embodiment of the zeitgeist of the time. In page 7, so you can see the quotes, right? Torvald's language in these exchanges just exemplifies this persistent infantilization, right? Um, so, in a sense, Nora is, I mean, she is policed morally constantly. Um, there's this sense of being a woman, right? So Torvald says that is like a woman. So he frames this into gender, right? He frames fiscal responsibility as distinctively as a masculine attribute. So at the same time he asserts this authority in Nora, right? Um, he enforces the moral code expected at the time, and he belittles her. He belittles her, and at the same time, Nora acts accordingly, right? This is all fake. This is a role. In a sense, this could be seen as a role play. This is not real. Their words coming out at the time, and in most of bourgeois households, were at society's grasp, not at their individual needs as a whole. This can be seen in general as performative, and the effectiveness of Torvald's control is seen here. He indicates that she is not an adult. She needs financial and moral knowledge, which in turn just underpins her autonomy as a person. Calling her a featherhead, which can be seen as a person who doesn't really know what they're doing, isn't very um, smart in a sense, if you can put it in that way, and moralizes his debt. So he seems, I mean, in the role, he's a banker, right? I mean, at least he works in a similar role at the time, and he has more knowledge on these things. He utilizes that knowledge to belittle her, to make her feel as less. So he lessens her emotionally at the same time infantilizing her with these name calls, right? So this just regulates her moral and economic agency. In page 8, this is very interesting if you haven't read in the first time. If you notice the stage directions, playing with his coat buttons and without raising her eyes to his, there's this patronizing affection. So Nora's behavior is is the femininity that is expected in the household. She has this subtle act of submission, which in turn boosts Torvald's ego. There's this careful negotiation of power. If you can notice, if you can notice, she really wants the money, right? She needs the money, and after she tells him. But what is most important is the way she asks for it. She plays the role and he rewards her with it. So this interaction can reveal how there's this playfulness in a sense for the woman to be able to to have autonomy. The way she can have autonomy is by tricking the men, operating through language, gestures, and shaping her behavior with this illusion of care. The play never really states if Nora really felt this way, but we can infer that she, in a sense, needed to perform in this way because her whole life she had to, because she was always Papa's doll child. This will be seen further, but this is just a comeback with this act of submission. She submits herself purposefully to have a little bit of autonomy, and Torvald is framed as this benevolent provider, and only through him can her choices be legitimized, which further deepens the wound of Nora not understanding that she can have autonomy by herself, just that society doesn't want her to. Page 9 is very interesting. This is why it has the most quotes. So Nora gets very desperate, and then Torvald infantilizes her again. So there's these playful indulgences again, which reveal the deepest dynamic in the play. He controls access to resources while maintaining this appearance of generosity, thereby enforcing the dependency that Nora has on him. He feels, in a sense, that he is the provider, so he should be begged for the money. He calls her a spendthrift, which further constrains her to her role, name calling her. He he masks this subtle form of domination through these names, and this diminutive language underscores Nora's vitality and the gendered economic dependence. The male provides, the woman has to beg for the money. He then tells her that she isn't spending it correctly and that she spends it on housekeeping, which then again, she has tried saving the most money she can through the gifts she gives from what she receives from him. There are many quotes, and from this, I believe this is a very interesting one. Hasn't Miss Sweet Tooth been breaking rules in town today after he caught her with a little bit of the macaroons? So there really isn't that much to say about this part. There's just a lot of internalized subordination, and there's play of on the hierarchy. So he might say that he doesn't wish her to be anything, but in reality, what he wants to say is that she should remain submissive. She should remain infantilized and keep going into her role. The sense of that it's in her blood to be an odd little soul is very damaging, and it's a very harsh thing to say. But saying it is in the blood, in a sense, can also take back into the general sense that this morality is always in the blood, and that the blood, and that who is the role, whose role it is to play in reality has limits, and that it, I mean, you can see it in Dr. Rank that it is literally in the blood when he is ill, and when he sends the letter that he's about to die. You can see that it is in the blood. So this theme of being this familial bond is further accentuated by inheriting these traits, which was a very strict belief in 19th century, not only in Norway but in Europe as a whole. A strict belief that purity comes um, from the blood. Um, so then again, the most important part of these first 10 pages is well, at least five in this case, is the hierarchical dynamic. So there's this dynamic that there's this hierarchy that must be attained to, from Torvald infantilizing Nora, Nora playing this role that Ibsen really wanted to highlight, the hypocrisy and the deceit scene by giving power to Nora. Thank you. Next week I will upload another video. Sorry right now that I'm sick, but I hope that you enjoyed this video, and that you learned a little bit more. This video is for future me when I have to take the IB exams, just to remember and to be able to see a deeper meaning of the words. This will be probably a 12-part series, at least for the pages section for Doll's House. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and see you next time.